we know that tax expenditures are the same as other kind of government spending. We know that they're very large, and we know that they're growing. So the next question on our agenda is who benefits from these programs? Who is actually receiving dollars from these tax programs that are going to help Americans subsidize wealth? This is the other piece that that our report from Upside Down to Right Side Up explored. And the answer is mainly high-income households. This chart looks at the American households split up by income, splitting up into 5 groups, the bottom 20% all the way up to the top 20%, and then we break out the top 1%. And this doesn't include all of the tax expenditures, we just don't have data for that, but it includes the majority of them. And what we find is that the top 1% of income earners in the United States receive more benefit in total than the bottom 80% combined. That's that top 1% there. Illustrating this fact, we have this next chart, which basically says the same thing. When you total up all of the programs out there and you ask how much does the top 1% get, how much does the bottom 80% get, you see that the top 1% receives a greater benefit than the bottom 80% combined. Another way to look at this is what is the average benefit for an individual in the top 0.1% versus the bottom 20% or any of these other groups of income. And that's what this chart does. And you know, we actually did the research on how much a Cadillac costs, and it is indeed possible to buy a Cadillac for about $33,000 if you get a low-end one. This chart looks at how much does, if you find yourself in the top 0.1%, what can you expect to receive from these programs in a typical year? You go to file your taxes, what's your benefit going to be from these wealth building programs? For the top 0.1%, it's over $33,000. For the bottom 20%, it's $77. Now you should be recalling at this moment the very first chart that we saw, looking at the growth of wealth inequality over the past 100 years. What we're doing is providing the top 0.1% with a huge subsidy every year to grow their wealth, whereas the bottom 20% are often getting nothing at all, and if they are getting something, it's minuscule compared to what the top 0.1% are getting, and even the top 1% and the others at the very top level. Another way to illustrate this is thinking about EBT cards. Now, I don't know if everybody's seen this. I did AmeriCorps in San Jose, California. I had an EBT card. Received very little money for food stamps, but it was helpful. This is how you receive your TANF and your SNAP, or food stamps as they've been called in the past. The average amount of money that somebody gets on food stamps in the country is a little bit over $1,500. The average benefit compared to this of somebody in the top 0.1% from these tax programs is over $33,000. So this is to scale, and this is how you should be thinking of them. This is how we should be thinking of tax expenditures, because as we've discussed before, there is no difference between spending through the budget code, as we do for food stamps, and spending for these wealth-building tax expenditures. So when you see the $33,000 a year going to the top 0.1%, you should picture them getting a huge EBT card where they receive that funds, because effectively that is what happens. So I've thrown a lot of charts and a lot of numbers at you and a lot of concepts. There are 4 specific takeaways that I'd like you to take from these past slides. And one is that wealth inequality is extreme and it is growing. It is greater than income inequality. And as we saw, the top 0.1% of Americans now own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined, something that hasn't occurred since the depths of the Great Depression. The second is that tax expenditures are government spending, and this is it's a key concept, but one that folks don't necessarily grasp immediately. But if you're to understand exactly how the federal government subsidizes wealth, you have to understand first that tax expenditures are government spending. The second piece to this, how tax expenditures work, is that they're huge, that they outweigh tons of other spending that the federal government does through the budget code, whether it's on Section 8 or WIC or LIHEAP or community development block grants. The federal government spends an enormous amount of money on these programs, far outweighing other types of government spending. And then this fourth takeaway is what we just covered. Then the vast majority of this funding for these tax expenditure programs is going to the very wealthiest individuals. So as we see wealth inequality taking off in the past several decades, it is aided and abetted by tax policy, which actively exacerbates wealth inequality by providing the top 0.1% and the top 1%, everybody at the top with a huge subsidy every year and providing very, very little to folks at the bottom.